Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial, and today we noticed a really interesting, really small piece that even if you've toured the battleship 100 times, you probably haven't seen before, but actually ties into the ship's World War II history. When you come and visit Battleship New Jersey, you're seeing her the way she would have looked around 1990 at the end of the ship's career, during her last active deployment. However, the ship is completed in 1943, so many features on the ship date back to then, and even if they're not used anymore, remnants of those often still exist, which help tell our World War II story. So, the piece that we're talking about today are these two up here. They have tubes welded on them, they're hollow, so you could have a rod that runs between them. This is where a curtain rod used to hang. Notice the tag above the door, 210. This is wardroom, stateroom, 210. So in the booklet of general plans, it'll be WRSR 210. We're down on second deck on the port side, right around frame 78. And this is inboard, just around turret 2. That's heading outboard over that way. This whole area, as built, were the warrant officer staterooms on the ship. However, by the 1980s on Battleship New Jersey, these original staterooms get largely converted into office spaces. This one ends up being the NIS office, or the Naval Investigative Service, the forerunner of NCIS. So this is where Gibbs would have been earlier in his career. Even though these spaces are converted to offices, they still retain some of their stateroom features, such as the tag above the door, and you can even see remnants of the tag here. So your division officer calls you to his office, or in this case, your division's warrant officer calls you to his office. There would be a name card slotted in there, so you could find which one was Chief Warrant Officer for Smith's office. This would have been complete. You can see the marks where this used to be a complete thing that's been partially removed, but really cool that that's still there. Not all the doors have them. The one right next door does still have a complete one. So very interesting, shows the ship in transition. But on New Jersey, these staterooms, the warrant officers just get moved up with the regular officers up on the 01 level. The other Iowa-class battleships, it's not all the same. On Missouri, they put a lot of the stuff that we have down here on this passageway up in the 01 level, and they retain these as officer cabins. No specific idea why. I suspect it's easier to air condition these spaces inside the hull than it was those up in the superstructure. So that might have been why they came down here and replaced several staterooms up there with the chapel and other things like that. But one of those things where the Iowas change from each other over time. Anyway, remember that Iowa-class battleships are war-built ships. She's laid down in 1940. World War II has already been going on for about 9 months by the time Battleship New Jersey is authorized and laid down. She's not completed until 1943. So during the time that she's under construction, the United States is attacked. Our battleship fleet is largely destroyed. The United States starts transitioning to a faster style of warfare. These are the only truly fast capital ships that the U.S. has close to being complete. So they are rushing the construction of these ships. It should take about 48 months to build a battleship in peacetime. Significantly slower, or significantly faster than a modern ship, even a significantly smaller modern ship. But Battleship New Jersey is completed in just 32 months. Some of that they're able to accomplish by working around the clock. But keep in mind, the shipyard's growing. They're bringing in a lot of relatively inexperienced labor. So that should still slow the ship down some. And yet they're able to rush things. So the blueprints were modified. I'm trying to remember, but there's a list of something like 19 or 20 different things that they cut out of the design to make the ships easier to build and quicker to build. Some of those are like we were supposed to get a third anchor as a backup, and it was going to have a notch in the deck cut out for that anchor to sit in a recessed area. And they just like, nope, plate that smooth. We're not going to make an extra anchor. It'll be fine. And it ended up being so vestigial that they never replaced that feature later on in the ship's career when they had the time and the money to do it. But one of the things that they stopped was adding doors, door frames, things like this. However, these spaces are still the private living spaces of officers. They're still the private office spaces of officers. Remember, these get converted into offices at the end of the ship's career. That's because the crew has contracted so significantly. During World War II, most divisions didn't have their own offices like they have in the 1980s. So the officers had to use their staterooms as both offices and staterooms. So if you're bringing a guy in to discipline him, you have to have some way to close the space off. If you're changing, you want to have some way to get a little bit of privacy. So by cutting out the doors, they're able to build the ship quicker, they're able to do it more cheaply, but they still needed something to partition these spaces off. And they chose to hang curtain rods. Significantly easier to put 2 screws in here, put a pole up, and put a piece of fabric across it than it was to look at all of these screw holes in this joiner door. And then when you hang a door, you've got to make sure that it's the right height and that it fits on the frame right. So for door hanging, you typically have a carpenter who's shaving it down to make it fit properly. Well, these are metal doors, so now you need a metal worker, and those metal workers are doing things with the armor plate. Why are we wasting them here on doors? It's just easier to go to a whole nother type of employee, seamstress or something like that, to get them to do this, and so much easier to drill 4 screws as opposed to 20 some odd to hang this door. Now, obviously, there's a door installed. Unlike the spare anchor, this was something that the Navy thought was important, and sometime post-war, possibly between 1945 and 1948, when the ship is still in service after World War II, possibly during her 1950 reactivation for the Korean War, they come through and they hang all these joiner doors in these spaces. It is worth pointing out, joiner doors, non-watertight doors like this, are not installed. However, the ship does still receive the full allotment of watertight doors like this one. They weren't skimping on the watertight doors. Like, things for the defense of the ship are still being installed fully. The Battleship does still have curtains in a couple of locations. One example of curtains, same reason that they would be here, privacy curtains for all of the coffin racks that sailors could slide shut, so they've got a little bit of privacy there in their bed. Obviously, enlisted sailors don't get nearly as much privacy as the officers. But the one officer's stateroom that does still have the curtains is the captain's cabin. Those are a little bit more ornate and nice than these curtains would have been. Notice how thin this bar would have been for supporting the curtain. And his is this big, chunky, kind of ornate brass-looking thing. But the captain's cabin actually retains its original curtains, whereas none of these other ones do. And many have lost their curtain rod holders, although you can see that when they were doing this, they cheaped out and they pulled the curtain rod and just like, leave the rest, who cares? As opposed to this former stateroom where you can see where it used to have the curtains mounted, there's even the drill hole for it, but they removed them, and only because they were installing this piece of plumbing over it. What do you think? Is this the most pedantic topic we've ever covered before? Let us know in the comment section down below if you want to see us talk about if window curtains were installed on the ship or not. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. It allows us to stare blankly at bulkheads and muse on what old features used to be. There's a link in the description below if you'd like to donate to support the museum, or you can support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find out about the museum and our channel. Thanks for watching.